Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes podcast, your weekly dive into funding, market, and investor news in architecture, engineering, construction, and supply chain. Before we get started, though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. Okay, good morning, guys. Today we have a special guest, Moritz, and we also have a special backdrop for Patrick, who couldn't bear to miss an episode recording, so has joined us from the car.
I'm a junkie.
Morning, guys.
Also, just to note that Martin
Morning,
is currently unable to access internet through Wi-Fi, so he has a cable significantly worth noting in 2024.
Anyway, definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah. How are we, Moritz? Nice to, thanks for joining us, and nice to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So we just had a little briefing before this discussion, and we're going to focus on three things today. So obviously, Moritz, you were the founder and had a successful exit with a company called Enscape, which was in the 3D rendering space. We'll then talk about, I think maybe a month or so ago on Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes, this series we discussed whether AI startups could disrupt the three big, should we say, incumbents in the rendering space. And then we will talk briefly about the future of the design stack. So, Martin, do you want to ask Moritz maybe the first question on Enscape?
Sure. Yeah, so Moritz, I'm very curious. What was Enscape when you guys decided to co-found it at the early stages? And what was Enscape when you were exited?
That's a very interesting question. Because Enscape, when we first founded it, wasn't called Enscape. We started a different company where Enscape developed out of it, which was called InReal back in the day. And So yeah, there was a VR startup when we founded it.
Does it have any connections with Unreal Engine or not at all?
Well, we had some ties to Unreal at some point because we were using Unreal before we finally made the move to develop Enscape. We actually used Unreal Engine for visualizations. There's still these companies around, these agencies around that are doing the same thing, where you use the Unreal Engine for visualization, now also with animations, moving people, moving cars, all that. So we had a go at that. And funny enough, that was part of the reason we talked to architects about this and offered them our services, and they said, nah, this is too slow. If we give you our design, then it takes 2 weeks until you get back to us. We have moved ahead quite a bit in this time, so that doesn't work. Plus, we want to do it ourselves. We don't want to give it out of house. So that was also one of the sparks for the Enscape idea after offering this to architects and then seeing that they need a different product. So there were some ties there, but other than that, not really. So the name was coincidental. I think Thomas, my co-founder, came up with it, and so yeah, Enscape developed out of that other company where the idea was to build a VR device, an omnidirectional treadmill, so you're totally immersed, which was ahead of the curve. It was before Oculus, so maybe we didn't execute well, but also nowadays these treadmills haven't really caught on. VR, you might say, has somewhat caught on, but also not really. There's no killer application. But we were very excited back in the day. So that's how it started, right out of university as a project during our studies, and then we founded it out of the studies. So
Moritz, quick
that's
question.
what.
Were you involved with the rendering and architecture before founding Enscape?
Not at all.
Where the idea came from.
That's another fun fact. So I studied business engineering. Thomas, my co-founder, studied mechanical engineering, so nothing to do with it.
Wow.
And also the industry before that, I didn't really know it, and I had some other people studying with me who went more into this real estate armor branch of it, where you could also focus your studies. And I thought, this is the most boring thing I've ever heard. Why would you do that? You could, you know, do fancy stuff, car building and so on, or you could go into these boring buildings. Now this has changed quite a bit over time. But back in the day, that was my thought. So we didn't have any touch points, but I really got to like this industry over time, over talking to many people in this industry.
Mm. Could you just talk us maybe just to start like very high level, perhaps what rendering is, why it's needed within the market, and then as far as I understand, Enscape had like a virtual reality layer to it as well. I think you just mentioned that as well.
Exactly. So rendering is basically the calculation of light in an object. So nowadays it's approximated with AI, but you can also do it quite mathematically, or you can do it also approximatively. And it's good for getting a feeling what a building actually will look like, because maybe you all know that in your typical view of a building, it's maybe shaded, but it looks kind of flat if you look at a building without rendering, and it doesn't really look the way it will look. And but to really understand what a building will look like, you need a rendering. At least that's what we realized, and that was what also architects and their customers realized. You want to have a real understanding of what you're getting. You don't just want to, if you go to a car dealership, you want to see the car before you buy it. And also with the building, it's more difficult because every building is a prototype, so you can't really see it, but a rendering can give you an idea of what it will look like. And then also touching on VR, you can also navigate through the space in a more natural way, and that also gives you a better idea of how big it is, which might be tricky on a screen. So this is maybe one of the killer applications, if done well, for VR, where you actually get a benefit out of it.
Hold on a second. So
But
why, if the architect is designing a building in 3D BIM, why can they not just show the how it's going to look like? Why there is a need for another like Enscape software and other software to show how it looks like? Because that should be already visible on the BIM design, for example, right? What's the
you would think so, yes.
Yeah.
You would think so, and that's also when we started. We looked at it, and we all came. We did do a lot of computer gaming, and so we knew what's possible technically. And then you look at these tools, and you see they're so outdated, and technically, the rendering is done on a graphics card on a GPU, but the early CAD systems had the rendering done on CPU, which is way slower, and so it would take hours. So yeah, the situation back then. We started the company. We started Enscape back in 2013. So it was a bit different time then, and the quality was quite bad. And to get a good render that looked decently with V-Ray or something, it might take a couple of hours to get a decent render out for your building, which you would still do in order to convince the client or to show the client what he can expect. And that was just a horrible workflow for the architect to wait for 8 hours. Maybe something went wrong in the render, and then you have to redo it again. And we started with real-time rendering, so every change you see is directly there, or maybe with a delay of a couple of seconds.
Wow.
But yeah, so quite a different workflow, and that was transformational for the architecture. I mean, that's basically what we learned after we sold the company. Everyone came up to us and said, "Oh, wow, this was really transformational, changed the way we work." So yeah, and there's no reason why the tools can't do it. And that's if we touch on what tools should look like in the future. I think there's no reason why the architectural tool or the design tool shouldn't look like it. But back in the day, this just wasn't the option, and we are on an old design stack where it's very hard to change things. I think Autodesk is on it. I think the others are on it as well, but it's apparently not that easy, and maybe not the focus.
Mo, for the layman, the VC investor brain is very dumb and it simplifies the world in too many ways. So let me be that dumb VC. So when rendering in the architecture process, or let's actually say the entire AEC process is applied, folks tell me, hey, really, you can apply it everywhere, but it's at the beginning of the entire stage and at the end of the stage where rendering is seen as having the biggest impact. So in the early days, when you're basically bidding on a project and you're creating your proposal as an architect to win a tender, renders play a very important role as part of your bid. And at the end of the process, for example, when you're building to sell specific buildings, let's say an apartment building or a building to rent a commercial space, the broker or the owner developer would need renders in order to market the asset, perhaps before it is actually being built, in order to, make sure that it's as quickly as possible off the market. And I always wonder, is that actually correct? Because it sounds like there's no rendering in between, but I can hardly believe that.
And funny enough, the in-between is where Enscape is strongest, I would say. You need the glam shot early on, you need the glam shot in the end, but in between you need quick renderings, quick iterations. You also need to talk to your owner. You also need to talk to most architecture firms. You also have a principal or someone who's maybe a little away from actually designing in CAD. And so you also want to discuss with them and have an easy way for them to navigate the building and to discuss things. So the need for the glam shot is maybe less there, but the need for rendering is there a lot. And that's where the strong point of Enscape is to be actually part of this workflow. So you touched on a very good point there. And
yeah, it's funny that you preface
not only
the question.
architects. I mean, everyone can benefit from just seeing what it will look like. It's also engineers. If you have very complicated structures with piping going everywhere, and then if you can explore the space in 3D and just naturally navigate through it, that can help clarify things than just looking at a 2D sheet. And so yeah, it's also during the building process and where it helps a lot, and that's where Enscape was strong.
Interesting. So, Moritz, was Enscape like one of the pioneers, should we say, within the rendering space? Because I think even to this day there is, I can't remember now if I mentioned it in the introduction or whether we were talking about it before, but there tends to be maybe 3 of the sort of larger companies that are the leaders in the space.
You mean Twinmotion, Lumion, Enscape, D5's coming up, so we can name a couple of them.
Yeah.
I'm not invested in either of them anymore. So
yeah. So
but yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to predict. Enscape wasn't the first one out there. V-Ray was there before, Lumion was there before, and Twinmotion, I think, also might have been started around the same time. And it's very hard to predict because we thought that all the technologies converge to a point where there's not a big differentiator between them because everyone can deliver a good or a decent quality. The workflow, maybe think the other ones will copy each other. So it will converge to a point where there's not much of a difference. So it's hard to differentiate. So you really need to look at how you can you differentiate. And talking about AI, maybe that's one way to differentiate from the others. Maybe going more into other ways of the workflow. What Enscape is doing now is a way to differentiate. But yeah, as we said before, I mean, there's no reason why not also the authoring tools can go into this space. So it's a tricky space to be in, and you need to see, and it's very hard to predict because it's all about innovation. Who innovates faster than the others? And back in the day, early on with Enscape, we were the ones who could innovate faster, where rendering really was a differentiator, and we could innovate a lot faster than the others, which is more tricky now that Enscape has grown, is merged with Chaos. And so the larger the organization, the harder it gets to really act this quickly.
What was the technical? Sorry, Martin. What was the technical twist to, that was fundamental to the success of Enscape, from 2013 to, let's say 10 years later? And what do you think has converged, or why is it so much harder to innovate in rendering now?
Well, what has converged, the graphics cards have become a lot faster, so it's easier to do it. So a lot of optimization was needed to be done back in the day, and a lot less optimization is needed to be done now, as the hardware has gotten that much faster. But the real twist, and credit goes to my co-founder Thomas, who came up with it. The real twist was that before you had an approximation of of the thing, or you could do this very slow proper calculation of the rendering equation, and he found a way to where you cast rays, and then you calculate every ray, and that's very costly in terms of hardware, and so you don't need to do it for every ray, but Thomas found a very clever way of doing real-time rendering. So some of it was more accurate, and then you could do some optimizations, because you can expect that architecture is quite still and not moving. So you could do some optimizations that you can't in games. So that's where Thomas's genius came in to get a better quality and still maintain this almost real-time quality of it. And yeah,
That is
since
very
then,
awesome.
real-time ray tracing or real-time rendering has become more of a thing now. Unreal is also doing it, and yeah, so we always looked at what's being done in research and then tried to implement that also right away into our tool.
On the history of Enscape and how you guys were looking at the business back in the days, and more towards the exit, can you run through what was in the co-founder's head when growing the business and developing? Have you always thought about selling it, or maybe there was different motivations along the journey?
I can only speak for myself. I can't look into Thomas's head, but I can only speak for myself, and I never had the urge to sell it. So we didn't start a business to sell it. You start a business because you have fun doing it. You want to work on an interesting project. And nowadays, you started, or I started, because I also want to solve a problem, get something done. And that's also, I think Peter Thiel said it, that you don't start businesses in order to get rich or to sell it, but you should start a business because there is a problem that you want solved, or a need that you want to fulfill, but not to get rich or sell it. So that never crossed my mind. Literally, we didn't talk or think about it. We thought maybe about valuation of how much worth could it be, but we didn't talk much about selling the company. Not until it became more of a thing, and there were more offers there.
What was the thing that became more of a thing that you kind of started thinking about? Actually, there's a great product. There's a market for it, and there's someone perhaps wants to buy it. What was the next step that you kind of stepped on?
The funny thing is, we did a lot of steps where people didn't want to buy it, where then we thought it's way better to have a product that people actually want to buy, and and that was a tough journey early on, when you build something that you find exciting and everyone is saying, wow, this is interesting, but interesting is not that they would really buy it. They just thought it's interesting from a technical perspective. And then coming from that technical perspective of, oh, looks interesting, to, oh, this is something I really need now, and this is a no-brainer, and I need to incorporate it into my business, into my workflow. This is a different story. And so this is this was a change, and this was a journey for us over 2 years of constant errors and learning from it, and until we finally hit that. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's the way it was for us. That when we finally learned that this is what people want, and then again, it was another 1.5 years of development before we could actually show something that was half decent, quite shitty at the time, but it was good enough that people could see the potential of it. And then over time, in German you have this, I don't know if it works in English, but a banana product which arrives at the customer. So it was pretty much that. It was when we launched it was this banana product.
What does that mean?
That's such a great metaphor.
Bananas, they you cut them down green, and then at the customers. At the customers, they turn yellow and they turn edible, and on the journey from South America to here, and so it's also a product that ripes and that kind of gets edible at your customers. So that was that banana product, which wasn't very ripe when we first launched it. It wasn't very sophisticated, and I mean we had to learn a lot about the space to be fair, but yeah, and then we had quite some customers, and then they helped us a lot in learning about the space, in learning what's really needed, and so then that's how it matured, and I think that was one of the things that we had going for us, that we developed quickly and listened to customers, and then iterated and developed quickly.
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
To go public, or there was obvious path to be acquired by Chaos, for example?
So we always thought that we will be acquired by Autodesk. I think, as we touched on before, there's no reason why such a tool shouldn't be incorporated in the underlying tool. Revit, in the first years, was the strongest platform we built upon, and then that changed over time. But so yeah, I mean that was a natural good fit. We thought Autodesk didn't think so, and so yeah, then we changed we had some discussions with them, but very briefly, maybe with the wrong people. And the funny thing was that while we had shortly after we had these conversations early on with Autodesk, they launched their own product, which also didn't help. And they launched, it was called Autodesk Live or Revit Live later on. And yeah, so they had their
stole
own
your
competing
secrets.
product.
They picked your brains, found out everything there is to know, and then just decided to build their own one.
Oh yeah, they were very
like
interested in us, and we thought, oh wow, this is awesome. They are so interested in us. This is great. We can really work with them. Yeah, turns out 3 months later they come out with their own product, and we thought, oh, these nasty people. They didn't tell us, and they picked our brains about it. But yeah, I mean, looking back, it was actually quite good then. Yeah. No, but looking back, it was quite advantageous for us because they prepared the market and did a lot of marketing that now you need VR, but fortunately their solution wasn't very good. So if people really looked into it, they would quickly find Enscape, and yeah, they're not bothered with Autodesk solution, but the marketing Autodesk did for us, and that was also part of how we could enter the market quickly. So yeah, I won't complain about Autodesk now. And looking back, it was always, and I like the people there. So it was just these early days where we thought, okay, this is maybe not so nice.
You know, I think there's a very deep lesson here that you can perhaps spread, especially with regard to AEC software. So what I hear you say is, hey, actually, it was not a disadvantage that we weren't the first. And it also was not a disadvantage that there was an incumbent building a competing product. It had an evangelizing and spreading the message type of effect on the market. So that's what I hear you say. Is there something out of that, you know, when you speak, because I know you're also doing your own investments and you know, your name pops up in my network so often. So when you speak with founders, is that something that you give them advice on? Hey, there is a too early, and if you're too early, do this. Or if you're maybe the number 3 in the market, do that, from your Enscape experience.
Oh, it would be great if you had recipes that would generally work, but it's when I look at these other companies or tools, they're so unique in the way they position themselves and how it works. You know how the customer journey works, how long it takes for them to get adopted, how difficult it is. And so, as much as I would like that, there's some generally working rules that you can always apply. It's very specific, is what I found out. You really need to dig in. You really need to understand the customer. How are they learning about the product? How are they using it? Who's using it in the company? And what are the competitors? So it's not a simple recipe, is what I learned. But you can transfer some of the learnings for some of the companies in some of the times. And of course I always give them my advice and tell them this is what works for us, but I'm not sure it works for you in this at this stage in your company. And to be specific, so we had a very easy to adopt product where people just would install it, click a button, and there you go. Uh, so making it so we could sell it online. We didn't have to have any salespeople, and people would just download it, buy with a credit card. Now, if you have a more difficult product that's more integrated in the workflow, where you maybe have to train someone, and then they also have to migrate information or link it to the current workflow or anything like that, which makes it more tricky, then it's a different situation, and that makes it tricky. But about competition, yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing if you're not the first mover. You can learn from the mistakes from the others, or also from the yeah. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but credit goes a lot to Lumion. We admired them a lot. We thought they did a lot of things well, and then we also did copy some of the presence of what they did on their website. We did copy that. That's also a way to be way more capital efficient if you have someone there where you can copy, where you can see what's working, and then you just copy that and you focus on what your differentiator, and the rest you just copy from the company that's there. So maybe that's an advice, that you shouldn't reinvent the wheel with everything, but if you see something working well, feel free to get inspired and focus on the differentiator.
Very nice. Morris, fast forward maybe slightly then to the acquisition and the exit for you guys. How much was the acquisition for?
Oh, there were two acquisitions basically. One was where we sold the majority to a local private equity firm. And then there was the merger with Chaos only 1-2 years later, which was a lot, and we hadn't planned on doing that, but the opportunity came around. And it's not disclosed how much it was. I'm not sure whether you can find it anywhere. Patrick, probably you through your network, you have figured it out. But who knows? Yeah, and I'm not sure I should say, but I think it's one of the bigger deals in this field.
Yeah.
So I can tell you that much.
You have never told me this, so what I'm about to say is entirely through my network. I have heard it was between 200 to 250 million US dollar. You don't have to confirm. Don't want to get you into trouble. That's just what my network has told me. So but I can say whether it is accurate.
Yeah. So I will neither confirm nor deny. But
we tried our hardest to focus on the micro expressions in your face to confirm either way. So anyway, so actually I just thought of a good title for the podcast that we're recording now. Will be One Company, Two Exits.
One Company, Two Exits.
That will get a few eyeballs.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to, I suppose that was a primer for my next question, which was, what were the companies looking at from you at the time? Like, was there a specific metric? I guess usually these things come down to like annual recurring revenue, but are there other things that perhaps you could talk about? And if there was like an annual recurring revenue figure that you were achieving at the time, perhaps how you achieved that?
So, of course, annual recurring revenue is one. The thing, because we didn't aim for getting acquired, we never optimized for revenues, which was maybe good, maybe bad. What we focused on was always customer acquisition. So we wanted to price our solution not at the highest price we could possibly get, but at a no-brainer price where everyone could quickly adopt it. And so also of course, if you talk to a financial investor, it's a little different from a strategic investor. Financial investors, they look at these KPIs. They look at revenues. They look at growth. Rule of 40 is what I heard from Patrick, is what you look at, and or from others. And for us, they looked also quite closely at the cohorts of user growth and user churn. How stable is your customer base?
Can you share any of these
And
numbers or metrics that you can recall from those times?
I'm not sure how comfortable I am sharing this, but yeah,
That's
it was couple of millions and then tens of millions when we had the second sale. So yeah, anyways,
You have to
with the
excuse
multiples.
Moritz. You have to excuse Martin. He's the journalist here.
Yeah. So
that's right.
but yeah. As I sorry, Martin. Yeah, to disappoint you there, I cannot go into details more. Not on camera and not before I got the okay.
That's absolutely fine. Okay.
But yeah. So and one number I can particularly point out, which was always a big discussion point between us and the acquirer, was churn, because churn was a number. We had this license model where we had the monthly and then we had the yearly licenses and the yearly floating licenses. And the monthly license, we had a lot of churn. We had 100% churn or something. It was very, very high because people would use it as an extended trial. You could just jump on a cheap monthly one and then you would transition to the other ones. And because with the installed software, it's very hard to track if a person from a company buys the software and then the company buys the other one and he churns. There's just no real link in the data. It's very hard to get this link. And so our gut feeling was always churn is not a problem because it's only in this cheap license type and not in the others. And the others were quite okay, or they also had comparisons to the industry, and we were top there. But it was still a big discussion point. Of course, they want to find a point to say why the company should be worth less and why it's tricky. But that was always the big discussion point. Do you have churn or do you not have churn?
Martin, if you allow me, just one quick comment and thought. So when I work with founders in the AEC software space that address SMBs or a mix of enterprise and SMBs, which, if I recall correctly, Enscape was serving both effectively. What I keep saying is, hey, the typical investor heuristic and like the intuition of the founder oftentimes is, oh, I want to convert everyone into ARR. So into a true yearly subscription, or you would even see, 3 yearly subscriptions, etc. And of course, it has certain benefits, but it has one big downside. You never understand your true churn, because the first churn event actually happens after a year, and your customer might be extremely dissatisfied, and you could usually see that in the telemetry, but sometimes not. And so if you don't see it in the telemetry, you will see it in your churn. But if you only close annualized contracts, you will not understand your true churn. So I do think there's just a good lesson here for founders in our spaces, not to just by default always go for the ARR type contract.
It's a very good point, because the feedback loop is so long, right?
Yeah.
And you might not pick up this feedback actually after a year.
So what a way around that to be, perhaps, Moritz, what you were touching on earlier was like have a monthly and a yearly, or like diversify what you're offering so you get different data and feedback.
So to be totally honest, we never looked at it that way because we weren't optimizing for that. We were optimizing for customer happiness and how could we get a customer, and that was our metric. We didn't optimize for what can we learn and how does it look on our churn or ARR or revenue sheet. We optimized how can we get the best value for the customer, and that included the revenue model. And that's what we optimized for, and the other was just a coincidence of following that. So that's an advice for really every founder. Look at what the customer wants and needs and how you can best convince him to buy, and the rest will come. If you build a successful company, then people will be standing in line waiting to acquire you. But the first thing is build a successful company, and building a successful company you can only do if you have happy customers and if you have many happy customers. And so I think the metric that you should aim for is that, and not any artificial metric that you want to or don't want to optimize.
Very nice. How big was the team at the time, Moritz?
So when I think at the first acquisition we were around 50, and then at the merger with Chaos we were, I think, 120, around that. So
What was the
quite some
composition?
growth.
What was the composition of the team? Like, was it a heavy focus on the product and the technical side, or more of a sales motion? Like, how did that look?
We had a heavy focus on the team, on the technical team. So I think it was 50% early on. Thing is, what does scale with business is support. So you need more support persons. Maybe you can automate it now better with an LLM, but and we try to automate as much as we can. So by the time we merged with Chaos, I think we had similar numbers, but they have had twice the people because we automated more than they did, and so now you can automate even more. But still, some things do scale, and the technical stuff doesn't necessarily have to scale, but the support has to scale with size. And so that's why we had also quite a large team there. And yeah, then of course you want to go for marketing and so on as well. But yeah, our focus was if you want to be a tech company, you should also have a good tech team. As I said before, you want to be able to react quickly, and unfortunately, the more features you have in a tool, the more people you need to maintain just the current feature set. And if you want to be innovative, you also need new people for the new ideas. So yeah, then you also have the necessity to grow over time.
And I heard you say earlier you had no salespeople. Was that even true at the end?
Well, if I say we had no salespeople, we had an awesome guy in the US who was not on our team, who was running independent, and you could arguably say he was doing sales. And other than that, we didn't have sales team. And in the end, we transitioned out. We installed a CEO. We moved to the board. And then we experimented with some sales, and I'm not sure how these experiments went because that was then really only after our time, and it never worked as far as I could tell while we were there. But it was just in the building up phase, so I cannot really tell you. I would have to ask them now how this went. But yeah. One thing is for sure, if you have salespeople, it's a lot more costly than if you just focus on marketing. So if you want to stay lean early on, it's the founders who do the sales, and you don't want external salespeople. What we also try to do is have resellers. So because then it's purely incentive pay. So you don't have them on your payroll, but if they sell, great, then they can also earn a share.
So we keep saying it fundamental, right? So inside every category creator, there's a fusion reactor called distribution. So the other metaphor that I like to think of is your product is the key that fits into a door, but your distribution is the assembly line with which you produce 1 million doors, which is a great metaphor to think, bad companies, they have neither a great product nor a great distribution. What I get to encounter a lot in AE software, especially, even in the C part, is founders that are very mindful of building a great product. But I experience way, way, way too few founders that actually from there take the step to truly mastering their distribution motion, the assembly line, to produce the doors. And I have found, and curious if you can just quickly confirm it, is in the architecture and engineering community, especially in the architecture community, it is a true community. It allows you such efficient motions if you truly commit to the content marketing, if you commit to product marketing, if you commit to creating a great community experience, etc. It sounds to me, judging by your sales staff or lack of that, that's what Enscape also found.
Exactly, and that's also what we try to do, and that's why I also said I like when I got to like this community and this industry, because I really like the community and how people work together, even they are in different companies, and then how they share knowledge, and this is amazing, and then really love it, and so I really want to stay in this industry, um, with all the challenges that it has, but yeah, and we had a strong focus on building community. Of course, that was one of the things we also wanted to foster all the time, and we had a community manager just focusing on that. As you say, it's one of our, how do you say it, keys or not keys, but assembly lines of what we
Yeah,
thought,
Unlocked
Entrepreneurs.
door.
how we could bring in people. Yeah, how we could keep people happy.
Nice.
Brilliant. I actually wanted to touch on exactly the same thing. And maybe have you got any other advice for founders about go-to-market apart from building the community and this? Yeah, what's the best way to distribute software right now? Perhaps you have thoughts on how it was back then, and has anything changed, or the community is the answer?
You know, this is what I touched on before. It's so tricky because every software is different, and for us this was great. But then I see I invested in some companies where the business model is more tricky and needs more explanation, and then this doesn't work. Simply because you need some explanation, and the website can only do so much, and the community can only do so much, and then you need more sales because you need to onboard them in a different way. So if you have I think it's quite transferable if you have a very simple tool that people just click on once and then see the value immediately. Then I would say many of the things we did um, still apply. The way we approached it was, you know, I got a marketing book, and then there's all the marketing channels you could possibly think of in this book, and you start on the first page, you end on the last page, you see what works, and then you focus on what does work, and because with marketing it's so hard to predict what does work or what doesn't, and so you can only have estimates or hypotheses of what does work, and then you go into it and you learn from it, and then if you see, oh, this worked really really well, then okay, do more of that. So you try, okay, maybe going to a trade fair, it sounds like a lot of effort, it sounds very costly, but then it does work. You have great conversation. Okay, we do the next one. And then you do print articles in a magazine, in the architecture magazine, and it's also very costly, and you cannot track it. And also in your website visits, you don't see an effect. So, okay, maybe we shouldn't do that and focus on other things that are less costly and that have more of an effect. So then you try something that you can measure. So AdWords, Google, or talking to the community more, and then you can also always try to understand how you can measure that, and then learn from it, and go into what works more. So that was our approach, and I think that's still valid. So it's more of an approach than of a real recipe that works.
I think this is brilliant. So basically, the key message is you have to try everything, throw a few small experiments to see what works, and then eventually you'll find the channel that works for you.
Yeah, and you can also ask your customers, how did you learn about us? Where would you find some? Where would you go looking? What are you looking for? Are you even looking for such a solution, or are you looking for something else? But then you found us, and so maybe I do need to do marketing in a whole different field where people are actually looking, because oftentimes what I realize with solutions, people don't even know that they have a problem until they find the solution. But if they don't look for it, then it's very hard to then Google AdWords don't work as well, because there you need to catch them where they have a problem. Then you need to do more marketing. So it's really um, several things. Do people understand they have a problem? Are they looking for a solution? And funny enough, that's where Autodesk helped us, because they said everyone has a problem if they don't have VR. So go look for a solution for VR, and then you need to be found. So, but if you don't have that, so if you have a next ERP, but everyone's happy with their current solution, no one's looking for a new ERP, but you have a new ERP in the field. So then you need to do it differently. Then you need to see, okay, what's the underlying problem and where can I market it? So that's chain of thought there, and how you go about that.
Okay. Real quick, and I'm segueing as well, Martin. Perhaps you are doing the same thing. One of the things that we have discussed a few times on Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes, Moritz, is that the common investor heuristic of, oh, please go after super large markets. And if you're in a very deep vertical, that's a problem. We believe that is wrong. And actually, Enscape, I see it as a fantastic example where, because you were going after a very narrow but very deep problem, highly repeatable, highly frequent, that was part of the success, because it allowed you to build a product that was amazing. And that's my assumption. It also allowed you to target in the distribution really, really well. So now perhaps rendering is figured out. Perhaps there's no more innovation. We'd love to hear that from you. But it sounds to me like it was actually the niche that was also an enabler here.
It's not like there's no innovation there. It's just that the incremental steps of improvement have become smaller and smaller. So, and with AI that changes, because there you get a lot of quality quickly. So that's a new game changer. And in the intro you said that we will touch on that. And
Go for
yeah,
it.
so that's
Let's dive in.
Okay. So, we have done a lot of thinking also about it, and I will be on the board of a company that also does it, that uses AI rendering for the very early stage. As you said, Patrick, that's where you need the glam shot, the great rendering, and so AI of course can give you that. Plus, the design isn't so fixed. So
Are they an
when
authoring
I
tool
talk,
or they are a rendering tool?
they're a rendering tool. So because early on you don't need an authoring tool. If it's just getting ideas and proposing ideas to the client, you don't have a building yet. You don't have, it's just several ideas. So you can come up with ideas quickly, and you can, even though you have just a rough idea of what it will be, you make a block here, a block here, a block here, and then you tell the AI, now make a nice building with a facade like this, and boop, there you have it, without having to sophisticate it early on. So that's the big advantage, that you can generate these ideas quickly and these options quickly, and that's where AI is quite useful. Is it really buildable then? Yeah. Is it really great then? You need to do a lot of work after that. But just giving the customer an idea of where it can go, what maybe in the past you did with mood boards or with other projects where you would say this is what we have done, but now you can really hand tailor it to them and give them a more customized solution. So I think that there's a lot of value in that. Now, what was tricky, and I think it will be solved at some point, but what was tricky was the consistency of these AI models. So if you have a building and then you create a prompt and you create a rendering, and now you want to have this same rendering with the same background from a different angle for the same building, this is very tricky because things will always change. If you do the same prompt twice, it will never give you the same result unless it's somehow overfitted, or I don't know. But yeah, so that's the tricky thing, that this consistency, which makes it tricky later on. It's good for early design, but that's why all the architecture firms I talk to are not using it as much later on. Where it is getting stronger though is just refining as a filter, refining what you have rendered before through Enscape or through whatever. So I think the current systems are in quite a strong position to also, if they execute well, to also capture this market, because they have the customer base, they have the rendering, and then you just put a filter on top, and it looks amazing. So you can do that, and you can do that with the current renderings already. There's other tools with which you can do it, and then you can upscale it through AI. So I think every rendering tool has to go with AI at some point, because it gets so much cheaper and the quality is just there. But yeah, it's a process to get there, it's very hard for me to tell who will be the winner. I think also, again, who will innovate quickly and who can get a solution that really works for the customers quickly. But I got approached by at least 5 of these startups, and I know there's many of these startups just using some Flux or Stability open source AI model, and uh, and even looking at it, because it's so early days, I have no clue who of them is going to be the one or the one solution, or whether if it is even just one solution, or whether there will be many solutions,
So from
or
this,
the incumbents. So that's my take on it now.
from designer's point of view, it feels like the easiest solution would be a consolidation of an authoring tool and rendering tool in one, so you can quickly and swiftly skip from the design into the rendering. So do you see the future of software design stack like merging, consolidating into one tool, providing like both, or that will be as it is right now, so you have authoring tools and rendering tools, and people swap models between those two?
I think if you again look from what a customer wants, I think a customer doesn't want 50 different tools for 50 things he wants to do. He wants to have one solution that works, and he doesn't have to always check, is there a new solution? Is there a new solution? This is very stressful for the users to always be up to date. What the user wants is one solution and work with that. So I think from a user perspective, and that's where I think it will eventually go, what the user wants. And I think from a user perspective, it would be great if you were just in your tool, click a button, there it is. And Enscape was pretty close to providing that, even without being part of this software. But yeah, that was also always a threat that we really felt, that why don't these platforms, these underlying platforms, build it into their tools? They could just build it in as a feature, and this would kill the market. Well, maybe not every market. Maybe you can still do something with the glam shots, but for many use cases, this would be sufficient. And yeah, so I think then it's just a matter of priorities. Is this the priority, or do you have 20, 50 other priorities coming first, where people complain about not being able to build or automate the wiring, which if I'm an authoring tool, I will also focus on my users and focus on what gives them the best value. And maybe it's not rendering. Maybe I have 20 more features that I develop first before I go into rendering. And then it will take longer, and then gives the other companies the time and the market. Because also there, logically, you also want to help your customer most.
So previously there was a problem you mentioned earlier with GPU, CPU, like processing power, I guess. Is it now no longer a problem, or there's maybe different angle of it? With authoring tools having rendering tools built in.
I think it's less of a problem, or people don't see it as much of a problem. I don't think now the GPUs. I think Nvidia is now focusing so much on AI that they also delayed one of their GPU generations, because I mean it's just not a differentiation. Also, if you look at computer games, which were driving this, the hyper-realism isn't necessarily what's now driving computer games or adoption of new computer games. And much like here, so now with AI, I think you get this level of realism into your images, and I think this is where it's going. And so the GPU is not as much a bottleneck anymore, and yeah, so I think it's just shifting of where you want to go. Of course, you want to have nice renderings during that, but with the current tools, I think you can get quite close to what's sufficient.
I think that we've been exploring this a little bit. So if I can try and paint a picture of the future of the design stack and a design stack, and if there was one tool that could do authoring, interoperability, you could all work on one single file format, you could render from there. Maybe you could throw in structural design. Don't mean to upset you, Martin, but do you think this is possible?
But you are in 2040.
It's not only just about the technology of the rendering. It's what Enscape had a bottleneck in was also the sophistication of the users working with materials and having textures and all that really applied to their models. And so the model quality was always the bottleneck. And I mean, you can also get around that with AI when you just prompt it. So I would think that So I'm working on it, and I would think that at some point this shouldn't be a bottleneck anymore. I don't think will be the things that you will really be concerned about a couple of years from now. You will have many solutions to choose from, or you will have one solution that works very well that is in your built into your authoring tool. And either way, it will be very simple for you to use, and you yeah. So I don't think it's one of your problems in the future.
Patrick, are you looking at any like rendering tools, perhaps? Like, what's investor take on them? If you
Yeah, so I probably looked without even knowing all the ones that Mo has been looking at, and also the one that Mo briefly mentioned, which I think is the strongest one out there. We haven't really made a deployment into the AI-enabled rendering space, and barring a huge change, I don't think we will in the next year or two, because there's just because the technology has democratized, because of the factors that Moritz is explaining, the bar for a new entrant is extremely low. The incumbents, so to speak, with Lumion, Twinmotion, and Enscape, are still not in a run the business mode. They're still in a grow the business or change the business mode. So you're having, and that's different from a traditional incumbent. Typically, you say, hey, a traditional incumbent doesn't scare me or shouldn't scare me because I can innovate faster, I can grow faster, I can adopt technologies faster, etc. With these three incumbents, that's not what I believe is the case. I think they're still in the change and grow the business type of mode. And so for me, it's not a market that is sufficiently supporting enough players so that you can comfortably make a bet at the seed stage which of these new age AI-enabled rendering kinds of players would truly become a new category creator. I find that very difficult to pick given these circumstances. When it comes to the design stack, Moritz and I have been talking about this a lot, is in our opinion, there's two positions, and maybe actually if you merge them, it becomes a true king position that are very interesting. So either you own the workflows of how design and planning happens. That's the authoring tool. And if you own that, other people will need to build on top of you. Or you own the data infrastructure and the harmonization of data. Owen, I think your comment about interoperability was bang on, but below interoperability, there sits databases and data harmonization that this industry has been lacking since the advent of CAD. So if you own that, you can also own the workflows that run on top of you. So our view is that you need to own either of the two in order to own the workflows that run on top. If you own both, currently I don't see who that would be, then that would potentially be a very interesting position.
Moritz, why do you disagree with Patrick?
Oh, we have discussed a lot about it, and no, I agree, and I want to be part of these tools. So I'm really looking into where can I invest in these tools, because I see it same as Patrick, to be honest. But one thing that can be tricky, and there I want to hear your opinion about, because harmonization is a good thing, but then someone told me that in electrical or some of these trades, you will always have 2D plans. And if you want to harmonize and have a 3D model of everything, but then someone is still working in 2D plans, how can you harmonize that? I mean, what's your take there? Do you also think that some trades will always work in 2D plainly and then that stops harmonizing? Or do you think at some point, yeah, this is all done automatically? Because I have not made up my mind of what I'm 100% certain of, but so it would be good to get your ideas as well.
Martin, you're the civil engineer.
My intuition is that even if these 3D tools will evolve, you will have trades be able to very quickly generate 2D stuff out of this 3D software or files. And whoever wants to play with 3D, they will. And whoever wants to get 2D, will get it very quickly, get it done in 2D. That's how I feel it should be done.
In my opinion, we won't kill 2D. And the reason is in my brain, very axiomatic. So if you think about the design and planning and then construction in terms of the collaboration that has to happen in order to get it done, you quickly realize that the collaboration will be among experts as well as non-experts. It will be among people who have, within the expert part of the workflow, a very, very deep singular specialization, and it will be among experts that need to look at a ton of workflows. Classic example. The person that does fire simulation has to, at some point, get a sign-off, perhaps from a client or from a department head, from a manager, etc. And so the first person is an expert that does the exact same thing repeatedly and only that. I'm exaggerating, of course, but just run with me here. While the other person needs to look over 100 different things per week. And what that creates is the necessity to, hey, do I really need to fire up my Revit instance in order to see one comment in a 3D model waiting for 10 minutes to load in order to sign off on that one comment? That's inefficient. That's not something that you can, that is sufficiently better as if you force everyone into 3D. And it's these examples from an axiomatic perspective where I at least am of the conviction that 3D and 2D together will continue to coexist because these workflows require it that way.
Yeah.
What if it doesn't take 10 minutes to fire up the 3D? If it's just there, if you stream it?
I have people in my life who can't park a car into a parking spot because their
Is it your driver right now?
Well, no, she's very good. She's very good. But because, not every brain is able to actually compute spatially the same way as other brains do. I have a hard time imagining that every person on the planet will be able to feel better with 3D than 2D. But perhaps you have a different conviction.
So what you're saying, so for my understanding, so what you're saying, we will always have 2D, but the 2D plane can also come out of 3D. So if we want to harmonize, 3D will be there, but we will always have to have plans printed out in 2D, even if they are derived from a 3D model. Because that was so far my vision of the future is, what's stopping you from just having digital twins from everything? Make it so simple to create these twins, make them so accessible that you don't have to wait 10 minutes. And then, of course, you can derive something from it, but in oftentimes a floor plan in 2D might be easier to understand, but always have the 3D model there. Make it so simple that it's there. So
I would agree with that vision.
Real good. I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like maybe we're at a good spot to stop this. But I also feel that, as always, when we get people like you on, Moritz, we barely scratch the surface. It's a little bit of a dilemma to have to end it. But how do you feel, Patrick or Martin?
Feeling great.
Yeah, exactly. I think we explored quite a lot, and it's also I think a good time to wrap up as well.
Okay. All right. Well, Moritz, thank you so much for joining us. I suspect this won't be the last time you'll be on Bricks and Bytes. So keep your eyes on this space.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me, and always happy to come back. Yeah. As you said, we scratched the surface.
And for Patrick, I'm inspired by how you managed to keep connection in your car the whole time.
Yeah, wow. I'm very impressed.
The German wireless infrastructure is obviously way stronger than London, because every time I get on a train and try and do these things, it just it never works.
I was driving through East Germany today. They got a lot of good infrastructure in the last 30 years.
Yeah, been changes there.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank
Awesome.
you so much. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.